Dear Professional Wrestling, this is the world's most dangerous podcast, and as the world's most dangerous game, I have to put you on game like only I can. And it's not just me here, it's also the Chaos Goblin, Kevin Kalloway. You know what? Some people aren't going to like some of the stuff we're going to say on today's podcast, and quite frankly, we don't give a damn because that just means this podcast isn't for you. This is for people who want to get to this thing called pro wrestling, who want to grow, who want to know more, and who also understand that we are not your financial advisors and we are not your life coaches. We are just coworkers that want to see you grow and do better, because at the end of the day, if you do better and if you grow, then the sport and art that we love also grows and does better itself. And this is also the podcast for wrestlers, by wrestlers. This is Dear Pro Wrestling. Now, Kevin Kev, I want to talk to you for a second.
Holla at me.
So, I don't know about you, but this past few months, I feel like I've been seeing a lot of stuff on social media.
Yeah, there's been a certain amount of like uprising on social media, and by uprising I don't mean like a good like rebellion, like coup d'etat kind of way, but more of a uprising of posts that are not relevant to business for a lot of workers. And I know you and I have talked back and forth a lot about it privately, and we both kind of came to the agreement that this was the episode to do now. And that's to talk about how we're conducting ourselves on social media and what this could affect.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I keep seeing stuff on social media, and it feels like the more I see stuff on social media, one, the more I think certain people don't need nor deserve social media, but also I don't think they understand that social media is a tool. And just like any tool, I feel like it can become a weapon. You get what I'm saying? Like, I feel like you look at a pen, right? And that pen can create, but it can also destroy. You know, and some people feel like, oh, well, the gun can protect. Yeah, it can also harm. And I feel like that is the tool of social media. People don't understand that social media can be both your best friend and your worst enemy.
And that's exactly it. Is we're seeing more and more posts, especially recently, where people are essentially taking those guns and shooting themselves in the foot, rather than using it to further their skill within things, or shooting skills, or whatever the case may be. Just getting that business out there more in a productive way rather than a self-destructive way. Hello?
I got kicked off the call.
Oh, that was fun. Where did we
I
leave
was like,
off?
we rolling now? Oh, damn. Can you hear me, Kev?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Were you saying something?
I mean, I was a second ago. I just don't remember what it is now. Because I realized you were gone after I finished my sentence.
Yeah, I was like, social media can be your best friend and your worst enemy. And then right before you could say something, it was like, you've been kicked off the call.
Oh, fun. Yeah. Great.
Would you like to reconnect?
Okay, social media can be your best friend or your worst enemy. And it was a tool, right?
Yeah, I was talking about it being a tool. It could be like the pen, it could be like the gun.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was saying, like, social media can both be your best friend and your worst enemy. Are we still recording, by the way?
We are. I kept it live.
All right, cool, cool. Then yeah, if you feel confident, we can just jump back in from there.
Yeah, let me give it a hot second and then I'll go. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, social media can be this great tool for you to use, but you got to use instead of taking that pin out of that gun and not utilizing what you can, like, these people are taking the guns and shooting themselves in the foot rather than using it to further their own skill, further their own business, put stuff into their pocketbook. And Paragon, I think that's kind of what we're getting at now is what kind of things that they're looking at that they might be losing based on these posts.
Well, some of the things that they may be losing, I think we need to get into it. We need to talk about it because I feel like a big thing that we've been doing on here, whether people have truly been paying attention, is we're not just saying, "Oh, I'm trying to put you on game." We're truly trying to put you on game because there is a lot that so many don't get privy to in wrestling school. Things that I feel like maybe even the trainers don't know to teach you. And so social media is something that is probably fairly new for some of these trainers. So maybe even they don't know how to navigate it. But I think we really need to get into just the depth of how social media truly can be your friend and your worst enemy. And I think the first thing I want to talk about is opportunities.
Yeah, there's a man that both of us know down in Florida, who loves opportunity, by the name of El Ridiculoso. Shout out El Ridiculoso, love you to death.
Opportunity.
Opportunity, and you know what speaking of him, he preached to me early about social media and making sure that you're utilizing it, and I always felt he exemplified it in a decent way. He had his slip ups every so often, um, but it wasn't. He wasn't posting anything on his social media that would shoot himself in the foot. It was all self-branded content, merchandise, things like that. But man, if you're posting anything else, your opportunities are watching you.
And you said something really key right there. Your opportunities are watching you. You never know what your post can create a domino effect for something else. Like you may be thinking you're just, oh, I'm making a post about this promo, or I'm making a post about this match, or I'm making a post about what I think is the best pizza in the area, or whatever like that. You never know who's watching. Like you are making a post. I'm just going to use this for an example of woe is me. How come people don't want to book me for their show? More people should book me on their show. I'm tired of people booking everybody else for their show and not booking me. Well, if I'm a potential opportunity, whether I am a booker or a promoter, whether I might be a fan that has the ear of a booker or a promoter, I may be a wrestler that might have an open spot in my carload. Do you really think that you are attractive to me in one of those positions? Because in my opinion, you just lost an opportunity.
Oh yeah, and that's a very quick way to lose an opportunity to jump in a car with a veteran, or to jump in a car with anybody really, because they're thinking their first thought isn't, "Wow, this guy does need a shot. I do like his work." Their first thought is, "Oh, how is this going to affect me if they fuck this up?"
And also, it goes beyond that for me too. I'm now thinking how many other people have seen this Facebook post of you crying and vague booking, and then I bring you to a show and they're like, "Oh, you associate with this guy?" You don't even have to have the opportunity to mess up. You messed up just off the Facebook post.
Yep, and you won't even get that
And
opportunity back.
yeah, and it's like, or if I'm a wrestling promoter and you keep complaining about how you don't get booked, so then why should I book you?
That's another thing. Like, public perception is very important in that. So if you're shooting yourself in the foot with that public perception, like, people's thoughts can go wherever they want. They don't. Just because you wanted it to be one way doesn't mean it is that way when someone reads it. And everything's up for interpretation when you come into this. So these opportunities, that you don't even know were potentially at your doorstep are now lit ablaze by a simple woe is me post, by a
And,
simple pizza review, by a simple it could even be I've heard people with this too, and I don't necessarily even agree with this one, but I've heard it happen. Um, like taking a picture while you're at a WWE event or like another big company event and you're in the seats with the fans. There are promoters that don't like that.
I mean, I'll even go deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about taking a picture at like a WWE or a AEW show. And for me, it's more so most wrestlers are just wrestlers. You're not a journalist, you don't have a podcast, whatever may have you. So why are you talking about people who work in a place you don't?
Oh my God, that's a big one. You do
Because
not need to publicly. You don't need to publicly shame any other workers if you don't want to. How did they phrase it to me? You don't want to make fun of or judge people in a company that you would like to work for.
yeah, it's like if you want to work somewhere, why are you talking about people in that place? That may be a coworker,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and being over here talking about someone who works for WWE, someone who works for AEW, what does that do for you? What does resharing some blog post and some dirt sheet thing, what does that do for your brand other than potentially someone who works for that brand sees what you're saying and it's like, yeah, I'm not giving that guy a dark match. Yeah, I'm not giving that guy a tryout. Yeah, I'm not giving that guy a contract because as far as I know, you put so much weight in those dirt sheets. How do I know that even if I did sign, you wouldn't still be posting stuff or saying stuff or whatever? You don't see Damian Priest retweeting dirt sheet stuff.
No.
You don't see Damian Priest out here, talking about, oh, well, such and such is told. It says that they are unprofessional, or they're talking about this. Yeah, I can't stand this, whatever, whatever. What does that do for your career and your brand, other than make me feel like, man, you sure share a lot about a place you don't work and have a lot of opinions on it. What about the place you do work? What have you shared about that place? How many flyers have you shared? How many promos have you made? What have you done to build the company you currently work for instead of talking about a place you may not ever reach?
Build your own value before you put over the other thing's values. Like that's businessing 101. And that's you know what? I'll even take us back to high school a little bit with it. That's persuasive essay 101. You build your argument, you build your brand first, and then you talk about other ones.
Exactly.
You don't start with the negatives about or like you don't start your persuasive essay on not smoking by going, but here are the joys of smoking. Like no, that's not it's not going to be a good persuasion. You've already started with why it's good. Why would we then double back to say it's bad? It doesn't make any sense. You got to build yourself up first in order to talk about anything even remotely close to that level.
And
And
I even think like, as indie wrestlers especially,
mm-hmm,
your mom and pop shop.
yep,
What does it help a mom and pop shop to talk bad about IHOP or McDonald's?
right.
Does that really hurt your business or does that make it seem like you're jealous?
It makes it seem like you're coveting thy neighbor's things. And it's just not. It doesn't help you look any better by tearing other people down. And just about everyone realizes that, even though a lot of people still do it. They still talk their shit, they still do their things, but realistically, like, it's getting them nowhere. It's just venting frustration. And you never, 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 and this will get us into the next thing that I really wanted to talk about. You never want to vent your frustration. You have to do things with intention. Because if you're not doing things intentionally for a reason, you're going to fall into a lot more pitfalls.
Oh yeah.
And if you're posting things in some emotional state or you're having a bad day, like I get it. People have bad days. But we are also not us in a weird way, which we'll talk about further on a different podcast because that's a ripe topic. But in a way, we are both our private self and our public self. But on social media, we are almost purely our public self. That is a public forum. You have to be posting with intention for your brand and how it looks to other people.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people forget in professional wrestling, you are no longer JQ Public. You are the brand behind JQ Public.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when people don't understand that they are a brand and then you post stuff emotionally, now people are equating that to your brand,
Yep.
which then can in turn affect your opportunities.
Hmm.
When you start posting emotionally or you start posting with a lack of intention, even if it's as simple as, oh, you're supposed to be a world champion or you're supposed to be, an indie darling, and yet you're just trying to post stuff for reactions and content instead of anything that actually has to do with your product, with your brand. I don't want to have a discussion with you of who has the best burgers and fries if that has nothing to do with your brand.
Hmm.
Like if Keith Lee the wrestler actually had Keith Lee the food vlogger's persona, that would be perfect.
Hmm.
Of him talking about like what is the best cheeseburgers that you can get in this area, and because now he's getting intentional feedback that fits with the actual concept of the character.
Hmm.
But with his whole thing being him being limitless, I feel like I'd rather watch him work out with CT Fletcher to see if he has a limit. That feels like that makes more sense. That's more on brand. You get me?
Yeah, and
And
it's like the old Mr. Perfect promos.
yes, yes. And I feel like a lot of people they just post stuff because they're trying to get reactions, or they post stuff because they feel like they're supposed to, or they post stuff because, and as you kind of touched on, they allow their emotions to get involved.
Hmm.
You, as a fan of wrestling, don't like this wrestler, and so you're commenting on them from an emotional standpoint. Or you, as a human being but not a brand, doesn't like maybe let's say this politician or doesn't like that this other wrestler likes this politician. So now you are now saying things in a public forum, and now in that public forum, you have now showed us what your intention is or what your emotion is unintentionally.
And just a quick personal aside with this, because when I hear that when I hear that a person doesn't like a wrestler and it's another worker, or they think they're doing it wrong, or whatever their opinion may be, I always think of this story. And he didn't post. I'm not going to say his name. I will say the surrounding characters because I think it's funny. Um, but I won't say the guy's name that said it initially because I respect him a lot. He just happened to get worked, and that happens. And allowing yourself into those emotions are fine if you're not posting it publicly. But in this story, Joey Mercury was at a show I was at, and he was working with someone in the ring. And before the match, he cut like a 10-minute promo. Like he had never been there before. He cut like a 10-minute promo where it was uncomfortably long, and he was just insulting all of the fans. What do you think happened when the babyface came out, Paragon? Well,
What happened?
what happened was the babyface gets this huge pop coming out because Joey Mercury set him up so flush. And then during the match, Joey Mercury was doing things to make the crowd uncomfortable, in that he was making them not feel as safe while they were seated. He wanted the action to spill out. And there was a guy standing next to me, and then standing next to him was Truth Martini. We both know him. We both were trained by him. Truth Martini was standing there, and the guy goes, "Man, I don't understand why Joey Mercury has to do all of this. This is really disrespectful to the fans. And I don't know why he has to do this." And he just looked angry. And Truth just looks at him, smiles, and goes, "But did it work?" And in that moment, the guy knew, oh my God, I got worked. And it's I tell that story to tell you this, or to say this about social media. It is okay to get worked by something, but you do not your first reaction should not be, "Hey, I'm going to go post this online."
Especially because, and I just want to say this, I know we said we were going to talk about this at a different time, but I want to address it. But especially because once you become a brand and you
Mm-hmm.
become a product and you become a public figure, social media is no longer your diary.
No.
It is no longer your diary. It is no longer your place to put your emotions out there. I'm sorry. If you feel that way, find yourself a journal. Create another Facebook account that's separate from your brand or whatever. But social media is no longer your diary. And so those feelings that you want to put out into the ether, find a more productive way to do it, because when your first thought is to run to social media, you've already lost.
Oh yeah. 1000% you've already lost if you're running to social media with the
And
emotion and
picture
opinion.
and picture this. I'm going to talk about a company called City Championship Wrestling.
Mhm.
City Championship Wrestling made some posts that made some people upset and uncomfortable,
Mhm.
but it was intentional.
Yeah.
It was purposely trying to make people upset and uncomfortable on one end to draw up some business and to ruffle the feathers of competition. Two, it was also a challenge to, hey, let's make this area better. Let's stop living in the past of laurels that no longer exist, and let's actually evolve. Let's create. Let's do some great stuff. And instead of people accepting the challenge, they got butthurt.
Mhm.
And I watched so many workers, so many wrestlers go on social media and speak on stuff they didn't know. And when I tell you it was so painful having to privately message people I actually care about and I'm friends with, and hey, you may want to take that post down because not only are you getting worked, but there are promotions outside of Michigan who are watching this who know it's a work, who are now laughing at the wrestlers reacting to it and laughing at the companies reacting to it and saying, I don't want to work with those people.
It legitimately that was a whole debacle in this my home state because so many workers fell for it. They fell for the work. And you know what? I'd be lying if for a second it didn't work me. But here was the difference. When it did, my first instinct wasn't, I'm going to go online. I'm going to yell about it. I'm going to share my opinion. My first reaction was to message a group of workers and say, hey, you guys know what this is about?
And to potentially also message the person who was saying the stuff.
Uh huh.
But
I didn't.
it goes back to the whole that intention thing. Because I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
be real with you, I don't think there were people's intention was to know. I think people's intention was to be outraged. They wanted to find something to be upset about that day, and not to speak on Michigan wrestling because I know I go in on Michigan wrestling,
You do.
but there's this theme in Michigan wrestling where they always talk about how they hate that there's something going on this day and this week, and yet they always find themselves in mess. And people who aren't even a part of the drama find themselves in the drama, but then say how they hate that the drama is going on. I'm like, then why are you in it? Why are you posting about it?
Then why are we keep being here? And I can tell you the reason why a lot of people, and this is meant for more than just Michigan. I just happen to see a lot more being from here and knowing more of the workers from here. Because I know this happens other places too. But they get into this just paradigm shift of thinking that their first instinct needs to be to go somewhere else instead of go privately to something. Like it needs to be called out. And I think this is an overarching thing in society these days as well is things don't immediately need to be called out and spoken about publicly until you have all of everything.
All of the facts.
Yeah, and you know what? Facts, and I cut a whole promo on this. Facts and opinions are starting to blend together. So
Mm-hmm.
even if you want to go off of opinions and not all the facts, because I think it's near impossible to get all the facts in a story between two people. But you can at least get both stories.
And you know what? My mom used to always say there's three sides to every story, yours, mine, and the truth.
Yup.
And I feel like far too often people either create their own narratives or they just choose to listen to the side they like. So that gives them fuel to go against the side they don't. And you know what? This also, which I love when we have these conversations because it just brings up, future episodes. That also within itself goes to put the proper ways and the good and bad of policing. Because I do think in some of those areas when people are calling stuff out, they think they're policing,
Hmm.
but there's so much stuff in wrestling that should happen behind the scenes instead of in front of them.
Yeah.
And this is an example of that. Like, this is a perfect example of you need to address things non-publicly,
Hmm.
because when you do them publicly and then you have a situation where you get worked or a situation where you make an ass out of yourself, now people are looking at you like, stand on business, don't back down. Now you said it, you meant it, and also I think it's a matter of which I don't want to jump off of this too quickly, but one of our next topics that we were wanting to address is when you are going to say something on social media, and when you're going to, whether you do or don't post it with intent, whether you do or don't think about the opportunities watching.
Hmm.
As a wrestler, you're a persona.
Hmm.
Hopefully you're a persona. Some people are characters, some people are gimmicks, but hopefully the majority of us are personas. We are an extension of ourselves, a heightened version of ourselves. So truly, would your heightened version of yourself post that?
And I think this is a topic that I was very interested in talking about simply because there's so many more blurred lines in wrestling these days where people are trying to blur a lot of their real life with a lot of their persona, and I think it can be effective if done right. So don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a bad thing. However, I feel people try and do it a lot, and then they don't stand on that business with it being their stuff. They use it almost as a crutch to hide, and it's such a weird balancing act between the persona and your real feelings if you're going to do a blurred lines kind of gimmick. Because if you're going to blur those lines and you're going to do that, unfortunately, what's going to end up happening is that everyone believes it's you saying it. So now you have to be real intentional about your posts online. And it
And
just,
I think part of the pitfall with that, there's supposed to be a separation.
mm-hmm.
One, because that separation allows you to remember who you are.
Yeah. So many people
But
get lost in their persona. I've seen it happen
yeah,
to so many good people.
yeah, so many people get lost in a persona. So many people get lost in this business. Like when
Mm-hmm.
people, and I know we talked about this privately, when people are like, "Oh, wrestling saved my life," or "Wrestling is my life," I feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for you because the moment you make wrestling your everything, you just became food. Because wrestling is a beast that wants to be fed and it does not care about you or me. And the moment you say wrestling is your everything, you became its nutrition.
Yep.
And a lot of times you are empty calorie nutrition because you're never going to be able to satisfy its hunger. But it's just, I get annoyed when I see somebody who's supposed to have a I'm a badass gimmick. I'm a badass. And then you are posting stuff online that makes you sound sensitive. Now, there's a difference between being in tune with your emotions and being sensitive.
Correct.
You're not looking like you're in tune with your emotions. You look like, I don't like that this person said this about me, so now I want to fight them. And I'm like, so your feelings are hurt. And instead of being mature about your feelings being hurt and handling this conversation in private, you want to gain sympathy and gain people to be on your side to justify your frustrations. So that way, if you do something stupid or can outrage others to potentially want to do something stupid, it makes you feel justified.
Yeah. You're not looking at that point. If you're going for a badass persona, you're not looking. You're no longer a badass. We'll start there. You're just no longer a badass in that persona because you're looking for reasons to be offended rather than to try and handle it. And that doesn't work. It doesn't coincide with your persona. It's a cognitive dissonance. You can't hold both beliefs at once. It just doesn't work that way. And everyone else will look at it and they might not realize it off rip and off the top of their head, but they will realize that there is a disconnect.
And you know what's crazy? So much of this, to quote Bernie Mac, is fucking up the church's money.
Oh, yeah, it
Like,
is.
we love to talk about the way my envelope is set up, and
We
I
do.
look at it like this: the way my envelope is set up, I don't have the luxury to have my opportunities watching me fucking up. The way my envelope is set up, I don't have the luxury to emotionally vague post or to unintentionally post things just for the sake of it.
Right.
The way my envelope is set up, I have to make sure when I'm posting stuff, this makes sense as to why Paragon would post it. And somebody may even say, like, well, Paragon's supposed to be this badass. Why are you posting mental health stuff? Well, because throughout Paragon's tenure, I've also talked about the importance of mental health. Tag me in is still very, very real.
Mm-hmm.
Because depression don't care if you a badass.
No.
Depression don't care about the championships you win.
No.
Depression don't care about how heavy of a man you can lift up and slam.
No.
Because guess what? Depression is even heavier, is even stronger. It can take out more people than you probably can at once. And depression will jump you because it'll add in anxiety and PTSD and stress and bills and responsibilities. So it's like, no, like, to me, you real badasses are people who are willing to admit when they're wrong, who are willing to admit when they're outnumbered, who are willing to admit when they're at a disadvantage, who are willing to admit when they're struggling, who are willing to admit emotional stuff going on with them, but they don't let that stop them, nor do they allow that to be a crutch for them to do something stupid.
Exactly. And they don't allow those crutches to just destroy their business or anything either. And it why do yourself a disservice when there's so many other ways that you can unintentionally and accidentally make mistakes in this business? Why do it
You know what
intentionally?
it is. You know what it is.
Why? What?
Because people don't want to make money in wrestling anymore.
Oh my God! Yeah, I think you're right.
People don't want to make
Because
money in wrestling.
well, and I think that this actually kind of goes back to the this goes back a little bit to the wrestling saves my life, wrestling is my life. Because I also hear the term wrestling is my therapy and wrestling is my art
Oh my
form.
god. No, therapy is
Therapy is
therapy.
therapy.
Go to therapy.
Go to therapy.
Take your ass to therapy.
Take your ass
Also,
to
I'm
therapy.
whoever's listening right now. I'm gonna get closer to the microphone real quick. Whoever's listening right now, drugs and sex are also not
They
therapy.
aren't therapy.
Video games and TV are also not
Not
therapy.
therapy.
These are all what you call decompressions. To decompress is not to have therapy, though. It's just a way to help relieve temporarily. Wrestling may help you decompress. It does not help you therapize. Now, therapize is not a fucking word, but I just coined it, goddammit.
Well, it's going in the what is it? Oxford, Webster, one of the two
Hey,
dictionaries.
I will write it in the goddamn dictionary, which makes it in the dictionary.
But in looking at that, I think the perception for wrestling now has changed so much in that so many people getting into the business aren't looking at it as a business. They're looking at it as an art form. Oh, this is the way that I paint I'm Picasso and this is my painting.
We call it the canvas for a reason.
We call it the canvas for a reason. And you know what? I don't disagree to an extent that it is an art form. But that's not what people in it should be looking at it as first. It's
But
not first and foremost.
I think another issue, though, to branch off of what you're saying, though,
Mm-hmm.
is, and this goes back to the whole policing and gatekeeping thing we're going to have to eventually address.
We will.
We allow too many people in wrestling that don't belong in wrestling.
Yep.
Wrestling is for everybody who is not a ist or a creep.
Yep.
No phobes, no ists, no creeps. Wrestling is for you. But the wrestling business is not for everybody.
That is accurate.
The
And
business itself is not for everybody. And I think part of the issue is too many people were allowed in the wrestling business who are fans. Now, to be a fan of something and to be a fan are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who are fans of wrestling but understand it's a business. And there are people who are in the wrestling business but they are fans. And so they act like fans. They behave like fans. They allow fans to get so close to them because they themselves are fans. They post on social media like a fan instead of a business, instead of a brand, instead of a professional wrestler.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, man. There's there's so many people who just absolutely don't look at all like they take this seriously to any extent. And everyone goes through their ebbs and flows with the business where they're taking it more or less seriously depending on what's going on in their lives. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the people who get cleared in the business, they get trained, and they go through legitimate training usually. It's not all the time, but usually. But then they don't. What they're getting out of the business is less of it's not money making ventures. It's not looking at it like a business. We keep calling it a business. They don't call it a business.
Which goes back to something I said on episode 1 and maybe episode 2 as well. It's called the professional wrestling business,
Mm-hmm.
which means you have to be twice about your business as you have to be about the wrestling. Your business knows the opportunities are watching. Your business knows that you have to watch what you post both with intention and out of emotion. The business understands that as a business, should I post this? Would I post this? Why would I post this before I post it?
And you know what? I think that brings us close to the end of this, and our large piece of advice is know your role and when to shut your mouth. As a famous wrestler once said, and you don't speak on things that don't affect you. If you are going out of your way to talk about things, to spread things, to just generally mismanage publicly or even privately information, it's going to end up coming back at you. It's never a potentially good thing to do that, because look at prominent workers now. You know what? I'm gonna use a very famous example. Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, during the time that he went through, he was incredibly successful, and he's one of the largest stars mainstream that's ever came through. But what you see now is now more of a reputation has been built based on stories. And it eventually catches up to you if you do that. So don't expedite that process, because throughout this business, and me and you have spoken about it a lot, I truly do believe there is a place for everyone to make some money in it and to find something. But it doesn't work on the backs of others. It works beside each other. It works together so that we can work together to make more money in it.
Also, if you look at everything we talked about today, your opportunities are watching.
Mm-hmm.
If you hush the fuck up,
Mm-hmm.
then there's no reason for them to, be upset with you. If you don't speak on stuff that doesn't affect you, there's no reason for it to affect your opportunities that are watching. If you hush the fuck up and don't post about stuff that, doesn't affect you, you don't have to worry about the intention of what you're posting and your emotion and stuff, because you're not getting your emotions involved and you're leaving them out. You know, your persona. Why would your persona be talking about politics? Why would your persona be talking about Sasha Banks being upset with her husband not doing the gear the way she wants to do it? Why would your persona be talking about whether or not Braun Breaker lost the IC title because he had heat backstage? Like, what does talking about those things do for you? Because they only affect you once you speak on them.
And it's, if you're wildly speculating, there's a higher chance that you're wrong. And if you're wrong, you look like the idiot.
And
Don't
at that point,
don't
become a
intentionally
journalist.
be wrong.
At that point, become a journalist.
Yeah,
Don't even be a wrestler. Be a
don't even
journalist.
be a wrestler. Because it's clear that your aspect in it is journalism and you want to talk about that. Do that. There's lots of space there for it. There's plenty of people who try and don't do it very well. Do it better than them. Like there's there's so many avenues to do and make money, like do something in this business and make money doing it. And there's so many people who say they want to do it and then they won't go about it in a way that works. It doesn't take it takes effort, but it doesn't take an absolute brain surgeon to figure out where your skills lie and how you can apply them if you know yourself. And going back to a point where like you should never be talking about politics publicly unless it for some reason somehow aligns with your gimmick, because then it's a persona post. It has nothing to do with you. If you support a potential candidate in, Europe's race, that's a potential overseas booking that you could lose if you start posting publicly.
Hmm. And you know what's a very easy thing to do when someone asks you about politics? Cut a promo and be like, "So they want me to talk about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And you want to know what I think about those? I think you should go buy Paragon's Protect Your Neck 4th of July shirt that shows me giving a clothesline to Uncle Sam. That's what I think about what's going on right now."
Because I think both of them need to protect their necks.
Yeah, like you literally just made this product placement, and
Yeah.
that's fine. Like use when people try to involve you and stuff, think about how I can make this work for my brand while
Mm-hmm.
not hurting my brand.
Yep.
Because sometimes the stuff you put is clickbait. You
Oh
can
yeah.
literally say, "People been asking me about this, and I'm gonna tell you how I feel," and then it's a whole commercial.
Yep.
You just posted a whole commercial that had nothing to do with it. You use it as a bait and switch, and guess what? That's fine. But the moment you talk about stuff, the moment you talk about woe is me, the moment you talk about this wrestler or this brand or this product or this match that doesn't affect you, like when I tell you, when I tell you how much I was seeing quote unquote so-called professional wrestlers talking about Jimmy Uso versus Jay Uso and the match they had at
Oh my god.
WrestleMania, and my response was, "But did you get booked?
Yeah, but were you there?
And are you going to get booked now that you're talking about this publicly?"
Mm-hmm.
Like
Oh my god. So many people, and it's like they want to try and play Texas Hold'em, but their hand is showing to their opponents. Like they're showing the entirety of everything to them instead of trying to hold their cards close to their chest and try and do some business with it and try and win this pot. And then they just go on there. They talk about this Uso match as if they know a lot of things, and it was just, that was a huge problem.
And here's my thing: some of these people can't wrestle outside of their city, let alone their state, let alone their region, let alone the country.
Some of these
But
people
they
can't
want
wrestle their way out of a box, Paragon.
some of these people can't wrestle their way out their own damn shoes, and yet you want to talk about people who are on platforms that you may never touch. I'm not going to say you won't because you never know who someone's going to be. There's somebody listening to this podcast right now, and you know what? I am so glad that I can say that this person listening to this right now, you're going to make whatever dream you want in wrestling come true.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also somebody listening to this podcast right now who probably is not paying attention, who's not taking what we're saying seriously, or who may be actually doing everything we're saying. And there's a ceiling on your potential,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's because of you or not because of you.
I
But at the end of the day, there's certain heights you're not going to reach, and there's certain heights you can't believe you're going to reach.
mm-hmm.
To talk about a place you want to be or never can be is so asinine. And it's so, like, it's just, it makes me look at the state of wrestling, and it makes me understand why a bunch of old heads feel like we let too many people in.
Yeah. The longer I stay in the business, the more I don't always empathize with some of the older thinking.
Especially because a lot of times they created the issue.
Yeah, that's the thing. But that is one of them that I keep ending up coming back to, and that's just the issue that there's a lot of people, and you know what? We'll get into this on another podcast, so I don't want to dive too deep. But there's a lot of people in the wrestling business who probably shouldn't be behind the curtain. They should be behind the rails.
Yes. Yes.
And that is not meant, I have to say this too, that is not meant as an insult.
Oh, I say it as an insult, as a truth, as a fact, as a statement. I say it respectfully and disrespectfully because
Sure.
it's a reality. It's a reality. Some people are not meant to be in a professional wrestling ring.
I agree, but what I'm saying, and I'm just saying it not as an insult, but as a reality as well, is it's just not. Wrestling is for everyone, like you stated, but it's not always for everyone behind the curtain. It just isn't. It's a lot of heartache. It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of bullshit to deal with, and it's tough. And there's a lot of people who come into it and they aren't mentally tough enough to deal with it. And that's okay. It really is. You can be behind the guardrail and supporting people just fine. There
And you
are
can
plenty
contribute
of
to
things.
wrestling in a great way by being
Yes.
behind the guardrail.
Absolutely. Oh my God, you are absolutely essential behind that guardrail. I will never disrespect a fan for being a fan. Be a fan.
I mean, mind you, I may quote Kendrick at you. You a fan, you a fan, you a fan. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. Well, that's all part of the show at this
I
point.
say if I'm a heel, I'm gonna get on your ass. But
Yeah, well, that's part of the show at this point. Let's get some people to feel something. But
yeah, I think we're gonna have to make this at least a parter. Like if we don't make
we're
this a full series, we're gonna have to part this one up because there's so much stuff on social media we did
there's
not
so much
address.
stuff to cover, and I think we're already at about the episode at the length we'd like to go with this because we're gonna have to go another 40 45 on this alone.
Yeah, but with all this being said, when you're posting stuff online, understand your opportunities are watching,
Hmm.
both good and bad. And I have literally gotten bookings off of people seeing me post promos and creating stories and sharing other people's matches. That's another thing people don't realize. When someone sees you sharing other people's matches, they realize you care about the show and not just you.
Hmm.
And opportunities are watching. Even that company, you want to be up on the card, they're watching what you post and they're trying to figure out what your brand can do for their brand. Posting with intention and reason rather than emotion is a very important thing. So for no matter how long you've been in the business, whether you've been in here for a cup of coffee or whether you've been here for the whole entire creation of Starbucks, like remember how you post things, people are watching. Ask yourself, as a wrestler, would the wrestler you are being, portraying, and are, would you literally post this? And why would you post it? And then at the end of the day, know your role and shut your damn mouth and stop speaking on stuff that doesn't affect you because it will. You know, signal boosting, it can affect you. Speaking on things when you don't have the full facts about it, it can affect you. People are watching. Your opportunities are watching. The Carlo that you could potentially be a part of, the show, the tryout, the whatever, they're watching. They hear what you're saying. They see what you're saying. Especially even if you're doing something that you feel is justified. Maybe you're working for a company that's treating you wrong and you make a post about it. There may be a company that's like, hey, you could have handled that in private. So why do I want you to work for me? You're going to have a disagreement with me and then do the same thing? Be mindful about what you do because you never know what you may gain or lose because you're just doing what feels right in the moment.
Absolutely, and just making sure, just just to sum it all up from my perspective, just really, really, really make sure that you think before you post.
And with that said, he's Kevin Kalloway. I'm the world's most dangerous game Paragon. Sincerely, dear Pro Wrestling.